Hi, in this tutorial today we're going to be covering basic rigging for the shotgun, which we unwrapped in the previous tutorial. Before we get onto that though, I'm going to run you through some basics of rigging, mostly how the hierarchy system works, and how the parent-child relationship works as well. So, say we've got two boxes here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to link them together. Okay, so one of these is going to be the parent, and that means that whatever you do to the parent will go down to the child as well. So if you move the parent, the child gets moved. If you scale, if you rotate, everything is going to get put back onto the child, like the child is attached to that in that respect. Whereas if you do anything to the child mesh, it doesn't affect the parent. And the reason for this is because of the hierarchy. Okay, the hierarchy goes, any data goes down but not up. See, our box here is the child underneath. Anything you do here doesn't affect anything above it on the hierarchy. It doesn't affect its parent. Whereas if you go down the hierarchy and you do something to the object on the top of the hierarchy, then it will affect anything underneath it as well. That probably sounds more complicated than it is, but it's pretty simple. You can do it with more than like really long chains as well. I'll quickly show you. So here we've got a longer chain, and still anything which happens to the boxes here. Anything that happens at the top of the box affects everything underneath it. If we go part way down, it affects anything underneath it but not on top. So, with that in mind, we can go and open up the shotgun file. This is the shotgun that we unwrapped in the previous tutorial. I've already gone ahead and put some bones down for this, just to make sure I got everything in the right place. If you don't know where the bones are, you go into your, where the hell that tab is, create, and systems at the end, and bones here, and you just click and drag, and right click to stop. So we've got 4 bones here, because we've got 4 like parts that need to move really. We've got this bone here, which is going to be the bone, like the main base bone that everything's attached to. And you'll notice that I put the pivot point for the bone where the foregrip is, basically. And the pivot point's important for that because that's going to be where you animate it from. So if you've got something like if you have an animation where the pivot point is really far back on the gun, like towards the stock and the grip area, it's going to look real heavy. Whereas if you've got it more towards the front, you can play around with the animations a little bit more, because it would be easier to like do certain kinds of animations that way, like if you're going to have him like throw the pump when he's reloading, stuff like that. But anyway, the bone up here, I've just put this slightly up and out of the way. That's going to be the one to control the actual pump. The one by the trigger is obviously for the trigger, and the one by the chamber, the bolts, is going to be for the bolt. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in here and we are going to add a skin modifier. The skin modifier is what you use to attach the mesh to the bones, and we're not going to be using soft envelopes, because that's like just would be silly really, and really super complicated to get this to do what we want to do. Soft envelopes are normally used for rigging of characters and soft body animation rather than hard animation like this. So we're going to go into edit envelopes, and we're going to add all of our bones. See, when I clicked add, this menu came up. I'm going to select all our bones, add them in. Doesn't really matter what's going on here at the moment, because what we're going to do is we're going to go to select vertices, so we can select vertices and make sure select element is ticked. So when we select a vertice, it'll select all parts of it in that element in max. And then we can come down to the weight tool here, and we're going to open the weight tool. This is really important. So first off, what we're going to do is we're going to set everything. We are not going to do that actually. What we're going to do is we're going to name the bones, because that would be so much simpler. So I'm just going to rename the shotgun to shotgun. The pump, the bone for the pump is going to be bone.pump. The main base bone is going to be bone.main. The bolt is going to be bone.bolt, and the trigger is going to be bone.trigger. See, what that's done now is it's named the bones, so we know which ones we want to assign to everything. So anyway, what we're going to do first is we're going to go into our select envelope tool. We're going to edit the envelopes. We're going to select the whole model, and we want to okay, what we're going to do actually is we're going to select the whole thing, so just drag select everything and go down to bone main, and we're going to set weight 1 to the whole mesh. So everything is weighted to that one bone now. So if we go to where the bone is now, we can move that around, and that moves everything on the model. That's not exactly what we want so far though. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the edit envelopes, and then we are going to select we want to go to bone pump. That's what I'm going to rig next, and we want to have obviously the pump on it. So we want to select everything that's attached to the pump, which is these little metal parts as well, and that part, and the metal slide part that's inside, which is covered by a bone, which is not particularly helpful, but I believe that's the one. And then we're going to set weight 1 to that as well. I'm just going to make sure that we've got both of these metal parts as well, and that is right. We've got that set to the correct bone now, so we can just get rid of that quickly while we're doing this. Next thing is the trigger. Needs to be weighted to bone.trigger, set weight 1, weight, and the bolt, that part of the bolt needs to be selected as well as oh man, this is not fun. There we go. I'm going to set that to the bolt. So I've got selected those parts and select it to the bolt one. So now we need to set up the bone hierarchy. So we're going to go into the schematic view, the hierarchy view here, and that's the shotgun. That's the model for the shotgun, and we've got bone main, bone pump, bone bolt, and bone trigger, and these are all going to be weighted, parented to the bone main. Yeah, that's right. So hopefully now, when we go back to our model, the main bone, which is the base one, everything moves when we move that, and then the pump is doing something funny. Okay, I just paused then to see what's going on and fix. I seem to fix it. For some reason, the link's just not working very well. It's doing something funky. So we're just gonna use a link constraint instead, which does exactly the same thing, but it's just another way of doing the same thing basically. So we're gonna go and select the bone and come over to, I think it's the motion tab. Yeah, motion, and just select this and assign controller link constraint, add link, and then bone main, and then we want to do this for all of them. Add a link constraint for each one, add a link the main bone, A link constraint basically is a tool which allows you to change the parent of a bone during an animation. So it's good for stuff like magazines and reload animations, which need to change. Like it's going to be attached to the gun and then it's going to be attached to the hand, so you can change that and it makes it easier to animate. So with that done, this should move around when you move the base bone, and then when you move the pump, only the pump moves, and the bolt moves on its own. Although I forgot to rig the other bit to that, I'll fix that now. And the trigger that moves on its own as well. So that's the basics done. Now what we're going to do quickly is we're going to set up some axis constraints. So for example, you can move the pump up and down. You shouldn't be able to do that really with like an actual pump. So we're going to go to the hierarchy tab here, and there's a section called under link info. Like it begins on pivot here, you go over to link info and there's locks. And locks is basically an axis constraint, so you can lock it from moving on a certain axis. So if you tick all of the locks on the move, you can't move it. So we only want it to be able to move on the Y axis. So we untick that one, and or it might actually be the X axis. Yeah, it's the X axis. So you can't move it up and down, but it will move side to side. And the real beauty of this is if you go to the base bone and you rotate the shotgun in some freaking weird angle, the axis constraint still stays the same. So it's not a world constraint, it's a local constraint. So it makes it really powerful if you're doing some funky animations to get stuff to move on the correct axis. And you can do the same thing with the bolt as well. And obviously you want that to rotate or scale. Well, I guess scale, leave that one. And you can do the same with rotation and scaling, obviously. So the trigger is not going to move at all, it's going to rotate only on the X axis. No. Z axis. So that's the one which is going to be left unticked there. So that's you can't move the trigger now, you can only rotate it. The bolt can only move forwards and backwards in the direction that it's supposed to, and the same with the pump. You can only move that on the axis that you want to, and obviously the base bone with the pivot in the right place for animating moves everything. If you select that and move it up and down, it moves everything. And that's pretty much you ready to go in terms of animation.